for doing this is submission to Allah. And this fleshes itself out in a lot of different practical applications and expressions in the religion of Islam, which we'll discuss later. Now, the person who revealed these truths, the person who proclaimed these truths and best practiced these truths is Muhammad. Now, Muhammad is an exemplar. He is not seen as divine. He is highly revered, but he is not divine. He is the greatest of the prophets, but he is not a God. He is not the equivalent to Jesus. As Prothero put it, maybe the clearest Christian connection here would be that Muhammad is more akin to Mary in that he brought forth the divine into the world, the divine being the Quran. So if you were to get an equivalent of Jesus in Islam, it would be the Quran. The Quran is the revealed Word of God, very much like Christians say that Jesus is the revealed Word of God. Now, who is God to the Muslim? God is Allah. Okay? The central unifying belief in Islam is submission to the one God, Allah. He is the creator of all things, and as such serves as a righteous judge between the righteous and the wicked. He is unified. He is indivisible, which means he is not triune. He is all-powerful, and so much so that a person's destiny is preordained by Allah. Allah preordains all that was, all that is, and all that is to come in this life and the next. We do not have control. This is to dash against the wall the idea that we can be sufficient unto ourselves. Now, as I mentioned, the Trinity is denied, and this is something that Christians pay attention to, of course, but it's something that Muslims want to clarify as well. They want to make sure that you understand that Allah is one God. He is not three persons in one deity or anything like that. He is one God alone. You cannot split him any way. Now, Surah 5, or chapter 5 of the Quran, verses 109 to 117 talk about this indivisibility of Allah, and particularly verse 116 is illuminating. This is from Maulana Muhammad Ali's English translation of the Quran, so it's not authoritative. Don't take it as the authoritative version. We'll talk more about that later, but it is a very interesting verse to read here in English. From section 16 of Surah 5, verse 116. And when Allah will say, O Jesus, son of Mary, didst thou say to men, take me and my mother for two gods beside Allah? He will say, Glory be to thee. It was not for me to say what I had no right to say. If I had said it, thou wouldst indeed have known it. Thou knowest what is in my mind, and I know not what is in thy mind. Surely thou art the great knower of the unseen. Now this is a little bit of a dialogue between Jesus and Allah. Jesus is actually saying, I never said that Mary is a God alongside of you. I never said that I'm a God alongside of you. And so in one quote, it kind of dashes against the wall again, this idea that Allah is triune or that Mary is divine. Okay, so it kind of hits both of those false doctrines according to the Muslim. Now, God does interact with his people via angels and prophets. These are messengers, messengers to be revered, not to be worshipped. Okay, these prophets include Adam, the Adam of Genesis. Okay, he's a prophet. Enoch, again, another familiar Old Testament figure. Abraham, Moses, Isaiah, and an interesting twist in Muslim, an emphasis is placed on Ishmael instead of Isaac, and Ishmael is a prophet. Okay, and finally, Jesus is a prophet. The people of Islam will not deny that Jesus is to be revered, that he is a great teacher, that he is a wonderful prophet, but they believe that the New Testament is an errant document that overstates Jesus, the reality of Jesus, you might say. He's not divine, he didn't die on a cross, he didn't rise from the grave. He may have performed a lot of those miracles, but only insofar as he was a prophet of Allah. And so the Jesus of the Quran is very different from the Jesus of Christianity. They may talk about him, they may revere him, they may say, hey, Jesus, great fella, but he's just a prophet to be revered. To believe in him as a God to, again, throw him in there with the Trinity. To Muslims, that's polytheism. That's not true monotheism. Now, the Quran, again, is this word revealed from Allah to mankind. The picture here on the screen is of my copy of the Quran. That's deceptive to say it's my copy of the Quran. This is an English translation and commentary by Maulana Muhammad Ali. It includes the Arabic. Now, we'll talk about this in a second, but the Arabic is the only authentic version of the Quran. Now, I'm going to read a quote to you from page 41 of Stephen Prothero's God Is Not One, in which he speaks about the Quran and the Muslim belief of the Quran. He says, "The Quran is the perfect, unaltered, and untranslatable Word of God." And so, the Quran, as revealed to Muhammad and written down in Arabic, is the perfect and unaltered Word of God, and as such is untranslatable into any other language. So if you are to read the real words of Allah, you are to read them in Arabic. Now, sadly, only 20% of the world's Muslims can read Arabic. However, from our Western point of view, maybe that we go, oh, it's really a shame they can't read their holy book. Or they say, well, that's really ridiculous that that's the only language that they can read the Quran in, and they can't even read it. But we kind of misunderstand Islam in a way there as well. It's not necessarily that the religion of Islam is a read religion, something that you are to read. It's more something you are to recite. We'll come to this later when we talk about the prayers, but the Quran is recited, and the beliefs of Islam are recited in the proclamation of faith, in the prayers that they say daily. They say a lot of the Quran, and they're really important parts of the Quran. It's also expounded upon by imams and ayatollahs and other religious leaders in the mosque, and so people hear it as well. But there certainly is this divide in terms of only 1 out of every 5 Muslims can read the Quran for themselves. Now, when you read the Quran, if you were to open it up, one thing that you'll notice is it's a short book. My copy is quite thick, only because it's got a lot of commentary from Mr. Ali. But it's quite a short book. You can read through it a lot quicker than reading through the Bible. The Old Testament is much larger than the Quran. The New Testament is larger than the Quran. I mean, the Quran is a short book. It doesn't mess with narratives or stories. It is purely a doctrinal and legal book. It's divided into 114 surahs or chapters, and they're organized from the longest to the shortest. So you get through Surah 1, you've read the longest portion of the Quran that you're going to read. And then you'll go through, Surahs 2 through 114, and they all get shorter and shorter. The last one is just a few words. It's not long at all. You get down into, 2 verse, 3 verse, 1 verse surahs near the end there. Again, the last surah, called Al-Nas, is just 6 verses long. The one right before it is 5 verses long, just a couple more words in Arabic. One thing you need to keep in mind as you interpret the Quran, if you take the step to interpret the Quran, is that they hold in their belief the doctrine of abrogation, which is to say, surahs written later outweigh surahs written earlier. Now, again, it's organized from longest to shortest, not chronologically. So there's a lot of Islamic scholarly work on what surahs were written earlier and later in Muhammad's life. They've got a lot of solid information from Muhammad and his disciples about which ones were written earlier and later, but there are some points of disagreement. And so they talk about, so it's written in this surah that you're supposed to do A, but then it's written in this surah that you're supposed to do B. Well, if surah 2 or surah B was written later, then it outweighs A. However, if surah A